Von Miller is a Buffalo Bill.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Thursday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you're joining us on YouTube, your first watch every day. We have a lot to talk about. Von Miller is a Buffalo Bill. And so is O.J. Howard. And so we have two major signings to talk about here on the podcast. And there's some other odds and ends that we need to get to. The Bills missed out on running back JD McKissic. We'll get to that. I want to talk about the cornerback situation, some free agent targets that the Bills missed out on, some draft implications, some rumors. But the lead story is clearly the signing of pass rusher Von Miller. 6 years, $120 million, $52 million guaranteed. And what do we always say about contracts? Wait for the details. Well, we got the details pretty quick on this one. And the sticker shock of 6 years, $120 million goes away really quick when you understand that this appears to be a 3-year, $51.5 million deal, and then we'll see. A great value contract for the Buffalo Bills. Chandler Jones signed a 3-year, $51 million deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. So Von Miller comes in right at virtually the same deal. This is one of those wow moments. It was kind of a challenging day navigating the opening of free agency. The legal tampering period started on Monday, but the league year started today. And I'm sitting there hoping that the Bills could find an answer at edge. They were in on Chandler Jones. They missed out. He went to the Raiders. They were in on Emmanuel Ogbah, and he re-signed with the Miami Dolphins. The options were dwindling down. Bills Mafia was getting restless. I saw your tweets all day long, worrying. And some of y'all got some tweets you got to go delete. And then, boom. Ian Rappaport tweets out Von Miller to the Bills. And my jaw dropped, and I'm sure yours did too. A monumental signing. The narrative changed real quick about Buffalo being a free agent destination and Brandon Beane being aggressive to try to get this team over the hump. It changed real quick. Whenever these big moments happen with the Bills, and I spent a lot of time stressing about what I'm going to say to you on this podcast, I always remind myself to simply be honest and tell the listeners how I feel. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So the first thing that I feel is excitement. This is a major pass rush presence. And you guys know how much I appreciate pass rush and talk about pass rushers, and defensive line is really my thing. So I am through the moon excited about adding Von Miller to this defense. 115.5 sacks across 10 seasons played in the NFL. A long resume of dominant play in the National Football League. You're probably thinking about his age. Von's 32 years old. He turns 33 in a few days, March 26th. He had an ankle injury in September of 2020 that forced him to miss the entire season. But otherwise, injuries have not been an issue for Von Miller. He's played in at least 15 games in every season of his career except for 2014 and, of course, the season that he missed. How did Von respond in 2021 from that ankle injury? 82 pressures, 9.5 sacks. Those 82 pressures are the fourth most of his career in any season and most since 2017 when he had 83. He literally is coming off of one of his best seasons in the league. He's still a damn good football player. And we've talked about how pass rushers age well because so much of rushing the passer is technique and vision, right? Being able to read the pocket, read the set of the offensive tackle, and the art of rushing the pass rusher really stems from technique. And as you age and as you become a sack artist in the NFL, you age well. We've seen it with a lot of players. And Von's obviously one of the most elite athletes at his position. Even if he's lost a little bit of athleticism at this point in his career, he's probably made up for that with his pass rush acumen. I think the Bills will get good production out of Miller for the next 3 seasons at least. So first of all, I am friggin' excited about this addition. Secondly, I am relieved. I was getting a little nervous about the Bills falling behind in the AFC. The Ravens are having a great offseason, and they're going to have a bunch of their players back that were injured last year. And they have a lot of good young players that are developing, and they've made some nice pickups. We know what's happening out in the AFC West with the Chargers and Russ Wilson coming over to Denver and them adding pass rush and Randy Gregory. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. The Bengals were just the AFC champions. Yeah, I was a little worried. And perhaps that was irrational, but I definitely felt my patience getting a little testy. I didn't want to have conversations with you on this podcast about hoping that Greg Rousseau and AJ Epinesa and Carlos Basham would all take major steps forward and that the improved defensive tackle group would make this D-line more impactful. I didn't want to have those conversations. And I don't have to. Because Brandon Beane went out and got Von freaking Miller, a 2-time Super Bowl champion, a Super Bowl MVP. Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane saw that firsthand. He was a Super Bowl MVP against Carolina, where he wrecked that game. He's an 8-time Pro Bowler. There's no guessing. There's no guessing about what you're getting in Von Miller. He's one of the best pass rushers of all time, and he's coming off of one of his best seasons of his career. And speaking of those young defensive ends, Rousseau, Basham, and Epinesa, you have to think that Von is going to be great for them in their development. So I'm excited, I'm relieved, and I'm definitely curious, right? Obviously, I'm curious to see what Von Miller looks like in a Bills uniform and see him play for this defense and the impact that he's going to make. But I'm also curious how the money comes together here. We know the Bills are pretty tight when it comes to cap space. This probably means they move on from Cole Beasley and create that $6 million. Micah Hyde restructured his deal, and I'm sure there's going to be more of that. Looking at Deion Dawkins as a candidate for that, Trey White, even Josh Allen has an opportunity there. Maybe this is where you start to work in more extensions to create cap space. So I'm curious how that comes together. And kind of the downside of this conversation is that it probably means Jerry Hughes won't be back. And I understand there's a lot of discrepancy amongst Bills Mafia regarding Jerry Hughes and his ability to contribute at this point in his career. But I have a great appreciation for what he's done in Buffalo and the amount of coaching staffs that he's survived. And how he's been so consistent being available. And I've really enjoyed watching his career, but let's face it, he's probably not back. But the Bills knew they couldn't sit back and let the rest of the AFC improve. They made a big statement. Von Miller is a Buffalo Bill. It's that time of year again as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. So Von Miller's a Buffalo Bill, and so is tight end O.J. Howard. I'm excited about the signing of O.J. Howard, maybe not to the degree of Von Miller, right? That's an all-timer. That's right up there with the Mario Williams move, Terrell Owens, Takeo Spikes, probably bigger, right? This is a high profile. This is probably the most significant player in terms of resume the Bills have ever found in free agency. So nothing's ever going to measure up to that. But I am excited about O.J. Howard. Signed a 1-year, $3.5 million deal with the team. 27 years old. He turns 28 in November. Was the number 19 overall pick, a first rounder in 2017 out of Alabama by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And O.J. Howard is an absolute freak of a football player. I had a very high first round grade on him. Like I said, 6'5", 251 pounds, 33 3/4-inch arms, 10-inch hands, ran a 4.5 140, 6.85 3-cone drill, 4.16 short shuttle, 11.46 60-yard shuttle. All of those tests that I just gave you, the 40, the 3-cone, the short shuttle, and the long shuttle, 90th percentile or greater. Oh, by the way, 121-inch broad jump, which is 84th percentile. This guy's an absolute freak. And when I look back at my scouting report from 2017 on O.J. Howard, this is what I wrote about him in my summary section. I said, O.J. Howard is a high-ceiling prospect that will dominate as a blocker from week 1 in the NFL. He has proven he can function at a high level in line, in the slot, or out of the backfield as a blocker. The amount of yards he creates for his offense as a blocker is impressive. Howard flashes significant receiving upside as he pairs a massive frame and catch radius with athletic ability and ball skills. His blend of size, athletic ability, and ball skills create a matchup nightmare for opposing defenses. Howard has the potential to become among the best at his position in the NFL. So has he done that? No. He's had a flashy but I guess unspectacular career in Tampa Bay when you consider the hype coming out. It's been a tough situation for him with Tampa. 3 different head coaches. Cam Brate was already a productive tight end that was on the roster when O.J. Howard was drafted. Then they signed Rob Gronkowski, and he still had some decent production, especially in his first 3 seasons. But then when Gronk got there, it really took away from his opportunities in the passing game. What he has proven so far is that he is capable of being a flashy threat in the passing game and a pretty good blocker. He hasn't had any issues with drops, and he's been used down the field. So his production's real. This isn't a Jonnu Smith situation where his production's kind of fake, if you ask me. Just kind of leak into space, dump the ball off, and ask him to go create after the catch. That's all Jonnu Smith did in Tennessee. That's why he can't make any plays for the Patriots. That's why I didn't want him on the Bills last year. His production was fake. O.J. Howard has a resume of running routes and catching the football down the field. For his career in Tampa, his average depth of target is 11 yards from the line of scrimmage. And so when you package this entire thing together, the size, the pedigree, the athleticism, what he's already been able to prove in terms of consistency catching the football and working down the field, I'm excited for what he can do in a situation like Buffalo. I really am. I think his best football is ahead of him. It was a tough spot for him in Tampa Bay. And I know the Bills already have Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox is tight end 1. There's no question. He's earned that. He should be a very prominent part of this offense. But the Bills needed a tight end 2 in a big way. How many times have we talked about this? Last season down the stretch after the Carolina game, the Bills were only dressing one tight end on game days. It was Dawson Knox, and that's it. Tommy Sweeney was a healthy scratch. They didn't have a second tight end that they trusted. So you needed a backup tight end. Now you got one with a ton of upside as a blocker and a receiver, and he's a big dude. I've stood next to O.J. Howard. I've interviewed O.J. Howard. This dude is just a massive man, just built different. One of those guys that's simply built different. So you needed the upgrade at tight end too, but there's been some rumblings about the Bills becoming a more 12 personnel team, 2 tight ends on the field. And this is absolutely a signal that's a real possibility, that we could see more 2 tight end sets in this Ken Dorsey offense. And I'm here for it. You have some really interesting skill sets at your disposal now with Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, Dawson Knox, O.J. Howard, Isaiah McKenzie. A lot of variety and skill sets there. I like that. Huge upgrade to the room. And a modest deal, right? 1 year, $3.5 million. And so we talk about tight ends being a slow developing position in the NFL. And obviously, I wish that O.J. Howard had proven a little bit more over the last couple of seasons, but he was on a decent trajectory over his first 3 years. And as odd as it sounds, Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski getting to Tampa Bay was not good for his ability to continue his ascension. I'm hopeful that he kind of picks things up and runs with it for the Bills, because in Dawson Knox and O.J. Howard, there's not a more athletic, physically gifted pair of tight ends in the league. There's not. It's the best. So I'm anxious to see how Ken Dorsey unleashes these guys, because there's a lot of potency in that room. So you're on Twitter, right? You find out Von Miller's a Bill. You're celebrating. You're losing your mind. You're texting everybody you know. And then like 10 minutes later, oh, by the way, the Bills also signed O.J. Howard. Simply put, the Buffalo Bills got a lot better on March 16th. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions like, is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and save money when using Rock Auto. Why would you choose to spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? They have everything you can need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. They have amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need over at rockauto.com. So the Bills signed Von Miller. They signed O.J. Howard. And they didn't sign JD McKissic, the running back that we talked about already on this podcast. And that's what's important. When you have the legal tampering period, it's players agree to terms. They don't officially sign. And every once in a while, there's a situation just like this where a team agrees to terms with a player, and then it doesn't come to fruition. JD McKissic, he changed his mind and signed the same deal to return to Washington. So the Bills didn't add to their backfield. And all the stuff that we talked about McKissic bringing to this team, just go ahead and throw that out, because they don't have that player anymore. Now, the good news is they can get that player. There's options here. They want a pass-catching specialist. Duke Johnson, Giovanni Bernard, Jalen Richard, Tariq Cohen, Cordero Patterson. They can get a player like that in free agency still. They can also get a player like that in the draft. Some really good pass-catching running backs in this year's draft. James Cook from Georgia, Kyron Williams from Notre Dame, Ty Chandler from Tennessee or North Carolina. That's where he finished his career. Rashad White from Arizona State, Tyler Beatty, Missouri, Max Borghi, Washington State. So there's still opportunity to get a back like JD McKissic for this football team. But it won't be JD McKissic. And look, there was some funny things that came out right after he signed in an article by Ben Standing for The Athletic. It talked about how Washington was surprised that they didn't get the opportunity to match that deal. And shortly after that report came out, Washington matched the deal and he went back to the Commanders. So it is what it is. The Bills don't get JD McKissic. Easy pill to swallow when you know you got Von Miller and O.J. Howard. So the big question left, right, for the Bills, the biggest question, there's other questions like backup quarterback and offensive line depth and those types of things, punter. But the big question now is what's next at cornerback? You know, Levi Wallace signed a 2-year, $8 million deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That came in a lot lower than I anticipated, and I know a lot of other people did. And you'd think for 2 years, $8 million, if the Bills wanted Levi Wallace back, they would have done it. To me, this is an open admission that they wanted to move on from Levi Wallace, which is interesting because Leslie Frazier, Sean McDermott have always spoken so highly of Levi, and you could tell he's wired the right way, and he's an overachiever. He works hard, does everything they ask, all that type of stuff. But certainly the Bills made a choice here because if they wanted Levi Wallace, I'm sure they could have given him 2 years, $8 million and had him back. So they moved on. And right now, the Bills are not in great shape at corner in my mind, at outside corner. With Trey White coming back from that ACL tear, again, a 9 to 12 month recovery. He had surgery in December. It's going to take time. Dane Jackson and Cam Lewis is your starting corners right now. I think we can all agree that's not good enough. But I have some interesting thoughts on that. First of all, there's options left in free agency. As of the recording of this podcast, the following players I think are fits that the Bills could pursue: Casey Hayward, Steven Nelson, Dante Jackson, Joe Hayden, Rasul Douglas, A.J. Bouye, Akello Witherspoon, Richard Sherman. There's veterans available. There's also a lot of players in the draft that could be an answer. And now that the Bills have answered some questions at defensive tackle and defensive end and offensive line with Roger Saffold, when I think about this draft, I'm thinking about corner. I'm thinking corner, I'm thinking wide receiver, and I'm thinking developmental offensive lineman. And from a draft perspective, let me bring this up regarding the cornerback position. Keep in mind, Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane were part of the Carolina Panthers, who went 15-1 in 2015. They were the NFC champions. They went to the Super Bowl. Josh Norman was an all-pro cornerback that year for them. Peanut Tillman was their CB2 in 2015. They let Josh Norman walk after the season. Peanut Tillman retired, creating what you would think is a massive need at cornerback. What did they do? What did they do about that? They turned around and drafted James Bradbury in the second round, late in the second round, number 62 overall, out of Samford, not Stanford, Samford, Samford. And then they took Darrell Worley in the third round, and that was their starting cornerback tandem the following year. After going 15-1, losing the Super Bowl, losing their top two corners, including an all-pro, they said, yeah, we're good. We'll draft somebody in the second round. We'll draft somebody in the third round. Those will be our starting corners. That's what they did. And so as much as we continue to want them to do something meaningful at corner, I think you're going to get a modest vet like an A.J. Bouye, and then some type of draft pick maybe in the first or second round. The Bills have, I wouldn't say the Bills, but Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have proven throughout their careers that they're willing to do that type of thing. Now, the good news is I like this draft for cornerbacks. If the Bills do pick one in the first round, there's three options that I think are realistic. I don't think Sauce Gardner from Cincinnati gets to 25. I think there's a good chance that he can go in the top 10, certainly the top 15. But then there's guys like Derek Stingley from LSU and Andrew Booth from Clemson and Trent McDuffie from Washington, who I think there's a reasonable chance that one of them could be there at 25. Any one of those three would be a phenomenal pick for the Bills. To me, if one of those three are on the board, you sprint to the podium, turn in the card. Get yourself a young corner on a rookie deal that's going to start for the next 5 years for you before you have to pay them long term. On day 2, there's a lot of players, but I think 3 specific Bills targets that I like. Kyer Elam from Florida, Alontae Taylor from Tennessee, and Cam Taylor-Britt from Nebraska. To me, that's what you focus in on if you're going for the draft. There's other good corners out there that people will talk about. Tariq Woolen, you might be able to add to this conversation. I think he's kind of a 2-year project type guy. Unbelievable traits, but let's be honest, he's probably a year away from really being able to step in and help your team. So there's options in free agency. There's good options on the first day and the second day of the draft that I think could come in and start for the Bills next year. But as we consider what's next for this football team, after making some big improvements to the defensive tackle room with Tim Settle and Daquan Jones and signing Von Miller as a pass rusher and adding Roger Saffold to the offensive line, the big spot right now is corner. I think the Bills have options. And the good news, right? There's anything we know about Sean McDermott and John Butler, the defensive backs coach, and Leslie Frazier, great resume of developing secondary players. And so if there's a spot where you just kind of say, yeah, kind of trust what your plan is because you've always proven it throughout your career, it's what the Bills can get done at cornerback. But it's obviously at the forefront of my mind right now. A couple of other notes as it relates to what happened in free agency today. We know that backup quarterback is still a need for the Bills. I thought Kyle Allen would be a slam dunk signing for the team to back up Josh Allen. He signed a 1-year, $2.5 million deal with the Houston Texans. And I would have loved to have seen the Bills sign Kyle Allen to that deal. Not necessarily because I thought Kyle Allen can come in and just be the world's answer at QB2 in terms of if he had to play. I think he could play at a baseline level, which is good, but he's like best friends with Josh Allen. They work out together. They train with Jordan Palmer. And a big part of that QB2's job is to help get your starter ready to execute. And so I thought from an in the classroom perspective, on the sideline perspective, that Kyle Allen would be the perfect QB2 to go with Josh Allen. Now the Bills are still kind of left looking for that guy. Another player that was signed off the market that I thought would be a good player for the Bills to add is Austin Blyth, former Aaron Kromer guy. Signed a 1-year, $4 million deal with Seattle. Thought he'd be a really nice guard center backup player that could come in and compete, right? Air quotes, compete with Ryan Bates, but ultimately settle into a guard center backup role. And he's no longer on the board. One other thing here, I've already kind of talked about the implications so far in free agency on the draft. Corner is first and foremost. Wide receivers there as well. I would still like to see the Bills pick a receiver in the first 2 rounds that can give them yards after catch and speed. And then obviously interior offensive line. Roger Saffold, probably a 1-year thing. And I'd love to have a player waiting in the wings to step in at the interior offensive line. And so that's where I really think when we talk draft at this point, we can really laser into those 3 positions as the primary needs. Last thing I'll say before we get out of here is there's a lot of rumblings about Jordan Phillips coming back to Buffalo. He was released by the Arizona Cardinals on Wednesday afternoon, and he put on Instagram that he wants to come back. And I mean, you could kind of read the tea leaves and believe that he is coming back. And a lot of Bills players rallied around that social media post. And next time we talk, we could be talking about Jordan Phillips being back on the Buffalo Bills and what that means. But we'll save that conversation for another day. Right now, it's all about celebrating Von Miller's arrival to the Buffalo Bills. It's official. And also tight end O.J. Howard. Great day. A great day in roster construction. And I'm sure everybody feels really, really good about what the Bills were able to get done and where they stand in this AFC that is gaining more and more premium talent and just becomes more competitive every time you see a transaction done. And the Bills made a critical move to really continue setting the pace and keeping other teams chasing what Buffalo's doing. I am through the moon excited about Von Miller being a Buffalo Bill and OJ Howard. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. We'll be back again tomorrow. We'll talk about whatever tomorrow brings. Maybe that's a backup quarterback and Jordan Phillips. If not, I've got plenty of stuff that I want to get into as it relates to free agency, the offseason, what's next for the Bills, different ideas, different talking points. So I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, but I do know that it's going to bring you a podcast, and we're going to talk Buffalo Bills football for you. So make sure you are subscribed, rate, review, share the podcast. If you're on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed, give it a like, leave a comment. Let's keep the conversation going. Tell me how excited you are about Von Miller and OJ Howard. And if for some reason you have concerns, put those in there as well. But I think for the most part, we are all celebrating some massive moves made by the Buffalo Bills. All right, folks, that's it for today. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.